Hello students, and welcome back to math class. Really appreciate all of the hard work you're putting into this. Hope you're staying well, staying safe. Let's get started now. We're going to work on some percentages today. Before we start looking at problems that look like your homework problems, let's practice changing percents into decimals. To change a percent into a decimal, I remember that the decimal point is here, and I move it 2 spots to the left. 35% becomes 0.35. 7%, if I move the decimal point 2 spots to the left, I have an open place value for a 0. 7% becomes 0.07. 250%, when I move the decimal point 2 spots to the left, the decimal is between the 2 and the 5. 250% becomes 2.50. 3.6% already has its decimal point. When I move it 2 spots to the left, there's that open place value for a 0 again. 3% is 0.03. The 0.6 just gets tacked on the end. I know that I can rewrite 6.5 as 6.5. So 6.5% is 6.5%. Now move the decimal point 2 spots to the left. 6% is 0.06. The extra 0.5% gets tacked on the end as a 0.5. This one's new. 7.25 is the same as 7.25. If I want to change 7.25% into a decimal, I move the decimal point 2 spots to the left and end up with 0.0725. To change a decimal back into a percentage, we move the decimal point the opposite direction. Move it 2 spots to the right, which puts it at the end of the number. 0.55 becomes 55%. 0.08, when I move the decimal point 2 spots to the right, the 0 is no longer necessary. 0.08 is 8%. 0.175, I'm still going to move the decimal point 2 spots so that it's between the 7 and the 5. 0.175 is the same as 17.5%. The problems on your homework are very much like the problems from our last assignment, except on the last assignment, the 3 types of problems were separated and you worked on them one at a time. This time they're all mixed up. Let's try number 1 as a good starting point. What number is 45% of 80? Let's translate using our math words. We know that is means equals. Of means times. What number? That's what we're looking for. 80. That's 80. And a percentage, we like to change a percentage into a decimal by moving the decimal point 2 spots to the left. What number is 45% of 80 becomes what number is 0.45 times 80. Let's do that on a calculator. I'm going to type in 0.45 and multiply it by 80. My calculator gives me an answer of 36. We'll circle our final answer. Here's the way the problem looks in the book. Here's what I'd like you to show on your paper. Number 2, what percent of 160 is 70.4? Let's start with our math words. Is equals, of is times. This time we're looking for the percentage. 160 goes there, and 70.4 goes there. Now we solve that equation for n. If I want to get n by itself, well, I should start by using the inverse of multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division. We'll divide by 160 on both sides. When you do this division on your calculator, make sure you type the 70.4 in first. It's 70.4 divided by 160. My calculator says 0.44. That's a decimal, but the question asked me for a percentage. I'll move the decimal point 2 spots to the right. What percent of 160 is 70.4? It's 44%. Here's the way the problem looks in the book. Here's how you'll show your work. Example 3. 160% of what number is 48? Let's get the math words set up. Is equals, of is times. Here's the number we're looking for. 48 goes here. Now this is a percentage. Let's change it into a decimal by moving the decimal point 2 spots, which puts it between the 1 and the 6. To solve this equation, we have to get n by itself. To get n by itself, we'll use the inverse of multiplication, which is division. On my calculator, I must type the 48 in first. It's 48 divided by 1.60. My calculator says 30. I'll put that there. Circle that answer. 160% of what number is 48? Final answer, 30. Number 4. This one's got a lot of fractions and decimals in it. We'll be careful. Is equals, of is times. There's what we're looking for. I'll copy 87.5 here. 12.5%, change it into a decimal. And remember the half is an extra 0.5 on the end. Now solve for n. Inverse of multiplication is division. We'll divide by 0.125. On my calculator, type the 87.5 in first. Divided by 0.125, and I get 700. Here's my final answer. Here's the way it looks in the book. Here's everything I want you to show on your paper. Here's the last two examples. 4 is what percent of 80? Is equals, of is times. We're looking for the percent. Copy 80 there and 4 there. Now solve. If I want to solve this equation for n, the 80 has to go away. The 80 is being multiplied, and the inverse of multiplication is division. We'll divide by 80. When I do this division, type the 4 in first. If I type in 4 and divide it by 80, my calculator gives me 0.05. That's a decimal. I have to change it into a percentage. So move that decimal point 2 spots to the right and call that 5%. 190% of 120 is what number? Is equals, of is times. There's the number I'm looking for. Copy the 120. Let's change the percentage into a decimal. Puts the decimal point between the 1 and the 9. This now says to multiply 1.90 times 120. 1.90 times 120 equals 228. There's the way the problem looks in the book. Here's everything you'll show me. Answer circled up good and proud. All right. These look great. You're doing a great job. Go do some homework problems, and I'll see you back here later on today.